3 of the Haitian Revolution Review Guided Lecture. We were just talking about Auge's execution by being broken at the wheel. That sounds like no fun at all. Which gets us to the next part of the Haitian Revolution, the Revolution of Saint Domingue. How it actually started, what inspired to start. There are really three key events that started the French Revolution. The first is, pardon me, the death of Auge. As you can imagine, Auge, a very popular figure among the Haitians at the time, when he was killed, that was a hugely unpopular decision and led to a lot of anger, and anger is often what times leads to uprisings. The second, you've probably heard of voodoo, and you might know that it's actually a religion. It is. There are priests in the voodoo religion. A priest called, and I'm probably going to get his name wrong, but Boukman Duddy is how I'm going to go with it. Boukman Duddy, he was a voodoo priest, and he got a whole bunch of the slaves in Saint Domingue fired up and encouraged them to rebel against their slave masters by killing them, by murdering them, by taking over their farms, by burning their farms, by destroying their property, and the people listen. During that time, and we'll talk about the results in 1 second, actually. And the third thing, the white colonists reached out to Great Britain looking for help. And when that happened, that really got the French-born people in Saint Domingue fired up and ready to revolt. As a result of that first step in the revolution, as we talked about, the Haitian Revolution was not a single event. It was several waves of revolution. In this wave of the revolution, read by Boukman Duddy, it was characterized by heavy violence. As you can see in this picture, the slaves rising up against the slave masters, the slaves hanging the slave masters. This is a picture believed to be of Boukman Duddy, but we don't know a whole lot about his personal life, so that may or may not actually represent him. Here we see the plantations being destroyed. There were three big results of Duddy's uprising in 1791. The first was the destruction of these plantations. Over 1,800 plantations were destroyed, and the island's not that big. So that's quite a few plantations, quite a few crops, and a lot of money that was destroyed. Second, 1,000 slave owners were actually killed. That's not counting other deaths. That's just counting the individuals who owned slaves. So that doesn't count wives. That doesn't count children. That doesn't count slaves who died in the fight. That's just counting slave owners. So it was a pretty violent event. And it also, the last result of Duddy's uprising was that it was a spark for future uprisings in the Haitian Revolution to occur. I think that people at the time, when you're starting a revolution, one of the biggest things that you have to fight is, can we actually do this? Getting people behind the idea of this isn't just going to result in all of us dying. Like, we could actually win this revolution. And the violence and the destruction of Duddy's uprising led slaves in Haiti to realize, if we actually do this together, we could change something. We could win this battle. This leads us to the figure that is most commonly put together with the Haitian Revolution, a man named Toussaint Louverture. Louverture was a Haitian general. He was a businessman. He was a wealthy businessman. He was well-read, very well-educated. All of the Enlightenment thinkers that we have read, he had read them, we are sure. He thought about them. He wrote about them. He was a very smart, a very intelligent, and gifted man, a very gifted leader. He made three decisions that were absolutely vital to winning the Haitian Revolution. And these decisions all manipulated other groups to help without them realize that they were helping. One of the characteristics of colonialism is these large powers fighting against each other. So France and Britain were enemies. Britain and Spain were enemies. France and Austria were enemies. Louverture understood this, and he took great advantage of it. So the first thing he did is, remember the whites had called the British for help. Well, Louverture negotiated with the Spanish to fight the British because they were enemies. Once the Spanish fought off the British, step two was to get the French, who were enemies of the Spanish, to fight the Spanish. So he used the Spanish to defeat the British, and then he used the French to defeat the Spanish. And that second step is incredibly brilliant, because the way that he got the French, remember, they're revolting against France, so why would the French help him? The way he got this is he said, I will be in charge of I will be governor of the island of Hispaniola, and I will be loyal to you. We won't change a whole lot of anything, but I will be loyal to you, France, if you defeat the Spanish. And the French were tricked into thinking that this would actually work. And then, as part of that negotiation, because France really wanted the crops to continue coming in, he negotiated the end of slavery in Hispaniola, which is absolutely huge. Most colonial powers see the United States of America don't give up slavery without a fight. And he negotiated the end of slavery in Hispaniola. And I should have been on this slide the entire time. So if you want to take a look at this slide, pause it for a second, but I'm going to move on. Everything I was just talking about is this slide. So moving on, Louverture was a very gifted leader in several ways. The first way he was a gifted leader was working with other nations. You heard about some of the manipulations he had with Spain and with France and with Great Britain. He was also a very gifted general. And as we see when the U.S. goes to Vietnam and when the U.S. goes to Korea, nations who live in these really wooded terrains oftentimes have an advantage over the nations who are invading. So the soldiers of Hispaniola had a huge advantage over the French or the Spanish or the British soldiers because they knew the terrain, they knew how to live in the terrain, they knew what was safe, they knew what was unsafe, gave them a huge advantage in battle. There were a couple of issues that Louverture faced. He took power in 1796. So we're about halfway through the Haitian Revolution. He took power in 1796, and he ran into 6 big issues that I want you to get down in your notes. The first of those 6 issues was with the gens de couleur. The gens de couleur, remember, are the rich and wealthy black class of Haiti, and the gens de couleur were living pretty well prior to the Haitian Revolution, so they wanted to remain French. They were more loyal to their money than they were to the race, and so they were more interested in being French and continuing their way of life that had made them rich. This led to event number 2, which is the War of the Classes in 1799, which was a violent uprising of the gens de couleur, where they tried to stop Louverture and the poor sections of the black community in Saint Domingue from continuing on. They tried to take Louverture out of power. They were unsuccessful, though. The third big issue that Louverture faced was the destruction of the cane fields. Any war has things that are destroyed from buildings. In this case, the farms were destroyed, and that was a huge issue for Louverture and the remaining citizens of Hispaniola because they needed, now that they had destroyed the cane sugar, they needed that cane sugar to sell so their government could have money. Remember, Hispaniola was a very rich island. That wealth came largely from the cane fields. So now that the cane fields were destroyed, they would come back, but it takes time to grow those. And Hispaniola struggled financially from that. That led to issue number 4, which is the struggling economy. Hispaniola was cut off from France, and France purchased a lot of the cane sugar that Hispaniola created. And it took time for Hispaniola to fix some of those economic issues that they were having, from who to sell their goods to what goods do we have to sell. So they had a lot of economic issues. The 5th issue is one of forced labor. Hispaniola was very wealthy in part because they had slaves, and slaves worked for free. Now that slavery was gone, remember Louverture negotiated the end of slavery, they had to pay their workers, which meant that they made less money in profit. So that was a problem for the ruling class of Haiti after the end of slavery. And the last issue was this question of whether Louverture was actually a dictator. When issue number 5 came up, the forced labor issue, Louverture actually sort of reinstated slavery. He didn't call it slavery. 2 key factors of slavery are you have to be owned and you have to not be paid. The labor in Haiti at this time was not property. They were not owned, but they were forced by physical punishment to work. They were paid, although not very much. It probably isn't technically slavery, but it definitely is forced labor, and it definitely raises the question of, is Louverture, or was Louverture, a dictator? That's going to end part 3. We'll have a little bit more in part 4, and then we'll be done for the session.